That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about The Fabelmans, aka Steven Spielberg's My Golden Days, which premiered at the 2022 Toronto International Film Festival, and it is being released courtesy of Universal November 11th, 2022 in limited release before expanding right before Thanksgiving on November 23rd. Notably, it is Mr. Spielberg's 34th feature.
I am familiar with Steven Spielberg, so no need to run down all the movies. You saw this, well...
I saw this
a while ago.
A couple months ago, yes. So this is the second time seeing it. I wasn't that enthusiastic about it, and you weren't really interested in seeing it.
I had zero interest in watching this movie, but I did. I found it to be pretty unremarkable, kind of corny, and a little all over the place.
Yeah, I agree. There's something that I'm not quite getting. The stellar reception it received after its premiere, suggesting that, this might sweep the Academy Awards, I think might have to do more with reverence for Spielberg himself, who, of course, with his filmmaking has kind of transformed cinema since the new Hollywood of the 1970s. Including myself. I think what's more interesting about it is seeing his version of his childhood over the span of a little over a decade, and seeing where those elements pop up across his work altogether.
So I'm not as familiar with, I didn't recognize any references, and if I didn't know this movie was sort of like a interpretation of Steven Spielberg's childhood, I would have no idea who this movie was about. I would think it's about a kid who wanted to make movies, because it ends without us knowing, without him accomplishing anything. He's still he's in his second year of college, so he's still quite young. But anyway, the basic story is Sam Fabelman, a kid. We see him when he's maybe 6.
About to see his first movie in the theater, The Greatest Show on Earth, which won Best Picture that year.
And he becomes infatuated with filmmaking. We can get into the details, but we see him making films throughout his young little life until he decides to stop because his family goes on a camping trip. We'll get into they moved from New Jersey to Phoenix to Northern California, but he records a camping trip he took with his family. So mom, dad, 2 sisters, and three, and the dad's best friend. And he edits that material together and realizes that his mom appears to be having an affair with the dad's best friend. The mom is played by Michelle Williams. The dad is played by
Paul Dano.
And the best friend is Seth Rogen.
Bennie.
But it sounds more salacious than it is. It's just kind of like them holding hands, exchanging glances. So Sam builds up this resentment towards his mom and his dad and wants to stop making films. But that love for film is reignited because he's asked to film Ditch Day for his senior class, and the reception is enormous. His parents divorce. It's not made clear why, but the dad moves from Northern California to Los Angeles, and we find out that Sam is in college and he's sort of commuting 3 hours one way to go from his college to his dad's place because he's trying to get a job in Hollywood. And the final scene of the film is that he's been sending out all these letters to get an opportunity, and finally this person who works in TV,
CBS,
the person who created Hogan's Heroes, invites him in, which didn't make sense to me because the guy invites him in and goes, well, I took a liking to you because I used to write these letters, but I can't help you because I do TV and you want to do film. But guess what? I think you should meet the most famous filmmaker of all time, and his office is right next door. Let's go. And that person happens to be John Ford, played by David Lynch.
Very interesting, yes.
And basically, John Ford tells him, how to shoot the horizon.
And it's a full circle moment because early on we see him going to the movies with his pals and he sees The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, which is a John Ford film. So it's kind of a full circle moment.
So Sammy's on top of the world because he got to meet John Ford, and the final shot of the film is Sam walking
Off into the horizon.
Off into the horizon, the end. I'm so confused. So Steven Spielberg at this point is like the most successful filmmaker, and he's older. So it's like, I'm surprised this movie didn't take a lot of chances at being more provocative, or maybe him expressing frustrations he had in the industry, big highs, big lows. This just feels like a movie about a teenager who had it pretty easy and wanted to make films, but we don't know if that ever panned out. And then he has this mother figure.
It really, oddly, it feels like kind of a love letter to his mother. And
kind of.
As when you grow older and, you know, the resentment you might have against your parents as an adult looking back and being like, oh, they were doing the best they can, and they were making these choices and decisions because of how they felt as humans. And
But it's so, like, obtuse because the dad works in, like, computers. And is like super like nerdy and into work and really boring. Michelle Williams, who I think is doing, I thought she was doing an impersonation of Kristen Wiig doing Judy Garland.
Oh boy.
I think it's kind of, I was giggling a lot.
I think the performance is fine, and I can see why it's getting such praise. You know, it's a very strong year for performances. So, I mean, to me, even when I saw it before all that buzz, it's a decent Michelle Williams performance.
I don't see it, but go ahead.
Before I wrote my review, I spent a lot of time trying to find out, is Michelle Williams Jewish? Is white Michelle Williams Jewish? And I couldn't find any information to substantiate that. But it's just very interesting that Spielberg chose her, I think, to portray his mother. Because to me, she reads on the screen as kind of a goy. But
okay, should I just go through my notes? The opening of the film is mom and dad take little Sammy to the theater. And I thought that opening scene was so corny because little Sammy is afraid of the movies because his parents decided to tell him, his little mind interpreted what they told him as there are giants like in the movie theater.
Sure.
And then the dad's trying to explain they're not giants, it's just the screen is large. And then the dad goes into this rant because he's like nerdy about how like the science behind motion pictures and the frame rate and then we see Sammy's eyes kind of like glaze over. But then when he gets into the movie, there's a train. Like there's a collision involving a train, and it's clearly like figurines being recorded, but Sam becomes like fixated on this and then wants like a model train set, wants to record it and play it over and over again. I just thought that was so, I don't know. It feels like every story about someone who's very successful in a certain realm and their beginnings were like, I don't know, pick a famous dance, like Michael Jackson seeing Gene Kelly for the first time.
Sure.
So his biography is going to be him singing in the rain, or it just felt so obvious, which leads me to my thought about sometimes very successful people are not that interesting. But then it's like we have to make them seem more interesting than they are because we have to somehow explain how they're successful. And it seems to me from this movie that it's just like this kid wanted to make movies. And he was allowed, like that interest was fostered. And then the movie doesn't explain how it turned into something real. But he didn't seem to have a lot of obstacles in pursuing this hobby of his, which he hates it being referred to as a hobby.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, yes, it just feels like it's missing something as to, like when you are privy to someone's, family photo album and you're like, that's great for you. I don't know how interested I am in spending 2 hours with you perusing through your files. And again, he's got, Tony Kushner, who is an excellent writer, who he's worked with several times before on things like Lincoln and Munich. I get the sense that he's trying to keep it very sanitized, though, in a way. And it reads like a 1950s melodrama, a women's picture. Because of the Michelle Williams performance. And which, again, I see it didn't really rub me the wrong way. It just felt like this seems like it's really more of a film about her than about him, and at least until the last half hour or so.
At first I thought Michelle Williams was going to be like a woman on the verge of a nervous breakdown, but she's not. She just seems like antsy, like she wants to do more than just be a housewife. And then there's a moment where it's after she finds out that in New Jersey, the dad has like hired his best friend Seth Rogen to work with him. and obviously Michelle Williams is in love with Seth Rogen. He's presented like being the life of the party and really like magnetic.
Well, he has a personality.
He has, which is not difficult to achieve next to the dad because he's so damn boring. And then, so the fact that Seth Rogen's character has like a personality makes him desirable to her, I guess. But when the dad says, "Oh, I took a job in Arizona," Michelle Williams is like, "What?" The minute we see Seth Rogen with Michelle Williams, it's like, oh, they're having an affair. It's very obvious.
The only other person who I love her, and I love seeing her on film is Jeannie Berlin, plays Paul Dano's mother. And she can tell right away at the dinner table. But I happen to have rewatched Spielberg's 1975 classic Jaws theatrically because it was released in 3D for the first time. And that couple, the Brodies, the Roy Scheider and Lorraine Gary, those are Spielberg's parents. That you can see the template from the Fabelmans. They're forced to move somewhere else. The housewife is isolated, only has these kids. And when Richard Dreyfuss comes to visit in that film for the first time, she seems kind of cuckoo. And I never really understood that as a kid watching it. Like, God, she seems on the verge. And that is where he's taking that from, I think.
Interesting. Well, what I was going to say is when the dad announces he's moving to Phoenix, Michelle Williams is like, "Oh, well, you're not bringing Seth? Like, you have to bring him. He's, like, so important to us." Like, what, bitch? Like, this is my family. You're my wife. Bring your ass on. But anyway, she has, like, a tantrum. And then at the same time, there's a tornado. And she takes the kids, hops in the car, and goes tornado chasing.
Which reminded me of a scene in Blonde where Julianne Nicholson takes the young Norma Jean off into the Hollywood Hills that are a blazing inferno. And it's this theme of, I think, these trapped, repressed women who want to abscond into oblivion almost.
I will say that scene in Blonde I thought was laughable. In this movie it works better, and I think that was kind of maybe what I was hoping for. And I think it's ironic that David Lynch plays John Ford at the end, because I feel like for this story to have been more appealing to me, I almost feel like it needed to have a Twin Peaks vibe.
Sure.
Because on its own it's not that interesting. Like, this lady is just she has a little too much, pizzazz for this man, and then she just doesn't want to be there. And it seems very reasonable how she's feeling, and ultimately, they divorce. But there is a funny scene. So she plays the piano. Like, she's a very talented pianist. She gets an opportunity to play on live TV. So there's a scene where she's playing for everyone, like mom, dad, our kids, and Seth Rogen. And she has these long red fingernails, which we can hear as she's playing the keys. So there's a scene where they like force her to cut her nails, but it sounds more interesting than it is. It's kind of like she's playing it up for attention. Again, I don't know. I thought that performance really did feel like Judy Garland, like SNL Judy.
It felt like something you would have seen in the 50s, I think.
The oldest daughter, the kids to me are corny. Like, they speak a little too earnestly, and the older daughter knows her mom is a hoe. Like, I think that's funny because there's a scene where they're camping and the mom is wearing like a nightgown, and she's dancing in the pale moonlight with the car's headlights towards her, and it's supposed to seem like this beautiful scene. I didn't think it was that compelling, but you can see the outline of her body, and the daughter is telling everyone, like, cover your eyes, like, mom is exposing her. I thought it was funny that daughter knew, like, Mom, you need to get yourself together.
So for me, besides Jeannie Berlin and an amusing David Lynch, I did also really like Judd Hirsch.
I think the best scene in the movie is Judd Hirsch playing Michelle Williams' uncle, who her mom had always sort of kept a distance from. So Michelle has this idea that and she has like some dream where her mom is warning her about a visitor or something.
After her death. Yeah.
After her death. So, which was like, okay, it's just a phone call. But he shows up, and I thought he was perfect. And he has a scene with Sammy, basically telling him, like, I see you. You're an artist. I'm an artist. Your mom's an artist, and we're not going to be held back. And there are consequences for that. Like, we're going to push our families away, which Michelle Williams does, kind of. But then we see in the end that she just kind of moved her family to Seth Rogen. But the thing that frustrated me with that is We never see Sammy become an artist.
No, but you do.
So if you don't become an artist.
No, but you do.
So if you don't know that's Steven Spielberg, it's like, so what?
No, but you see him starting to kind of be detached from the proceedings. Like when they announced the divorce, he's looking at how he would possibly film that scene rather than kind of being in the moment. So, what his uncle told him was true. Is like, you have art in the heart.
The best thing for me about watching this movie is I was reintroduced to the idea of paper plates. There are two scenes.
I knew that you would respond well to how she cleans the dinner table.
There are two scenes where Michelle Williams serves her family dinner on like plastic tablecloth and then paper plates. And then when they're done with dinner, everyone throws their plates in the middle and she folds it up and throws it away. So now I feel like, why haven't I been eating off paper plates all these years? So thank you, Spielberg, for that.
He has Oakes Fegley returning from West Side Story to play the #1 anti-Semite in the California high school.
Oh, the golden boy?
No, he's the little, the one that's so vitriolic towards him.
No, not the handsome one.
Oh, Oakes Fegley from West Side Story. Right? Was he in that? And then I thought Chloe East was entertaining as his girlfriend, Monica.
Oh, yeah. Sammy in high school gets a girlfriend who's super religious and she's Christian. It seems like she's infatuated with Sammy because he's Jewish, like Jesus.
Yes.
I actually thought that was funny.
But I love that her altar to Jesus also has this miscellaneous number of other handsome men.
Yes, she has. Okay, so the other thing that confused me is this movie, it feels like a sitcom.
Yeah.
Particularly with
all the beats feel
Paul
like sitcom.
Dano's mom, and then it just half of it feels like a sitcom, and the other half feels like this kind of dramatic piece about a woman who's unhappy in her marriage.
What did you think of Gabriel LaBelle, who I won't say he was plucked from obscurity because he's been in a couple things, but
Who's that?
Sammy.
Oh, he's okay.
I was distracted by, it looked like he had colored contacts in.
I didn't catch that, which I'm surprised I didn't.
I couldn't stop looking at his eyes.
He was giving me like a less interesting young Dustin Hoffman.
Okay, sure.
Because I do like Dustin Hoffman. And Dustin Hoffman is in a new movie with Sissy Spacek.
Yes, and his son, one of his children is.
That's his son?
I think so, yeah.
That is so funny because I watched the trailer and I thought that guy looks like Dustin Hoffman.
There you go, yeah.
The movie doesn't look like it's going to be good, but I definitely want to watch it.
Any chance to see Sissy Spacek.
And Sissy Spacek. But the moments in the film that I think I got emotional once. Sammy makes like 3 films throughout, little films that he shows to the Boy Scouts and like the Ditch Day movie. And one of them is called Escape to Nowhere. And there's a scene where Sammy's trying to get the lead character of this Civil War movie to give a performance. And I thought that was kind of also what I was looking for, is like, how did this young guy who ultimately became the most famous film director apparently, what was his process? We really don't, we do see him make the 3 little films, but it's kind of like, it just feels like any movie where you see a young person in the 60s or 70s recording something.
It's the early 60s by the time he's a teenager, but I think, again, it's just interesting, there are moments of E.T., the Boy Scouts, and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, there's I don't know,
when Sammy's cutting the film of the camping trip, he cuts out the parts where it's obvious that Michelle Williams and Seth Rogen are interacting inappropriately, but he puts all that film together and saves it and then shows his mom by throwing her ass in the closet and letting her watch it by herself. And when it's done, of course, it's very dramatic. She falls out of the closet on her knees crying.
And then on the trip to California, they have to stop over because she's crying, and she tells him basically that they never consummated the relationship. It's
I thought all that shit I was giggling. I did not think it was serious.
Lady, I don't believe that. But I understand that she probably would have wanted to tell her son that. But it's interesting that, a mother and son having to share that secret. And it made me want something like, I guess I wanted that pushed harder, as in Jonathan Cowett's Tarnation. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it's a documentary about his mother who was schizophrenic, I believe, but in kind of the traumatic upbringing he had with her, but also filled with love and emotion. But
this story does try to show that Sammy did have some adversity or some hard times, I guess. Of course, seeing his parents divorce, when he goes to the new high school in Northern California, There's some anti-Semitism going on. I mean, it's very blatant. They're like,
Very blatant.
we don't like Jews. Like, oh my God. And then there's a volleyball scene where he's being picked on by like the most popular kid and that other kid you mentioned.
And one of my least favorite scenes is after the ditch day showing at this dance, he makes this kid look like a god amongst children, and that young man is all upset because he's like, I can't possibly live up to that.
Can't live up to
Okay.
expectation. But then there's a moment where the mom gets mad. Michelle Williams gets mad at Sammy and slaps him on the back. And the reaction is like, and I was giggling too because I thought if I had that reaction every time my mom slapped the shit out of me, I would have no like air in my lungs because that happened all the time. So I think it's funny that later in the film, she's like, you need to tell me you forgive me for that one time I hit you. And it's like, could you imagine me telling my mom, I need you to say you're sorry for the 800,000 times you slapped me? I don't know. Maybe I was abused. Anyway, a funny moment was, which is very sitcom-y, is Michelle Williams gets a pet monkey. Because I guess she's bored. It was amusing.
Like Raiders in the Lost Ark. Yes, that she names Bennie after the Seth Rogen character. Like, whoa, this if we couldn't be... But it's like she's trying to get her husband to react and he just won't. Because she has to spell it out for him. Like, I needed something to do. That's why I got this monkey because I can't have Bennie.
That man. My overall thought is, well, my last note is, like, I just wanted so much more, and then we kind of get some repetition. Like, we get a scene where Sammy is filming Ditch Day, and then we actually watch the Ditch Day film, which is like, well, we just watched all that content. I didn't think it added much, except, like, I wish, like, we would have just seen the film, because then we see all the students reacting, and that was very powerful, because that's when he sort of realizes that this is what he should be doing.
Right. But again, I think that was to show like the mechanics
You're
behind
right.
what his creation is. But I agree that it does feel a little repetitive, and I don't know, maybe we need to see less at the actual Ditch Day while he's filming.
Yes.
But, he's got a lot of usual people behind the scenes. Janusz Kaminski is the cinematographer who's won 2 Oscars, both for Spielberg productions. John Williams as the composer, you know him for the Star Wars score, but he's, and many others, but he's, won 5 Oscars, and I think 3 of those are for Spielberg. So the production value is very, in a sense, heightened for this, but then it also just feels very limited, very contained.
It doesn't feel spectacular.
Right.
It doesn't feel grand. My overall thought is kind of like, this story is really struggling to find something interesting to say.
I feel very similarly. I feel very cold towards this film in a way that I felt towards Kenneth Branagh's Belfast, which I saw that ahead of time before all the buzz, and thought like this is a beautifully shot film with some nice moments, but the way that the Academy went gaga over it, I was like, oh, okay. And I predict maybe the same for this. Again, I don't think it's a terrible film by any means. I just think that you have to be sincerely interested in Spielberg as a subject, as a child.
Yeah. Again, if you don't know what this movie's about, you would really think like it's just about this kid who wants to make movies.
As a child who
and then you're like, I hope he makes it. I don't know.
As a child who I don't believe we really see the dark side of anything. But it's all around, like the fact that it's so interesting he got a job working on Hogan's Heroes because, the lead star of that TV series died horribly. It was murdered in a sex scandal. There's a film about that Paul Schrader directed called Autofocus, if you're interested. But
what would you give this movie?
I my mind's teetering to 2.5 and 3, and I go with a 3.
To me, 2.5 is okay. Like, this movie was okay. 2.5.
Okay.
Anything else?
No.
Hit the thanks button. Listen to our podcast. Bye.